All right, people, welcome to this episode of the Vision2Mission podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the housing market. All right, we're diving right in. At some point, as we go throughout the podcast, we're going to have Mr. Guy Allen of eXp Realty also come and join us and talk about his expertise with the housing market, some outlooks going into 2023, and a lot of other very relevant topics. So let's dig in. I've been taking a look over the past few weeks. I've been looking at the first several months of the year. And from my research and from my experience, being in the mortgage and real estate space, it's obvious that I would say the first maybe 7-8 months of the year have been a seller's market. Let me make a correction on that. A seller's market, because the demand was still high, okay, and the inventory was still lower. And what we've seen starting, I'd probably say from late July into August, into where we are now coming into November, there's been a very slow but definite shift. There's been a slow but definite shift. What does that mean? So the demand is coming down. And as a result of the demand coming down, it's meeting where people are putting their houses on the market. So now there's more of a balance. There's more of a market correction taking place. In fact, the number of days that homes are on the market, it's now closer to, somewhere in that 17 to 30 days on the market, where that was unheard of. It really in the second half of 2020, in all of 2021, that was absolutely unheard of. Now there's more of a balance. There's more of a market correction. Sellers are not able to ask for outrageous, prices on their home. They're not able to demand that people waive home inspections. They're not able to demand that people waive appraisals. They're not able to demand that buyers pay the commission for their own agent, right? They're not able to, have people come out of their pocket with an extra 50, 60, 70, or even more $1,000 above the list price. It's really coming, in my opinion, where it needs to be. Now, does this mean that I don't feel bad for sellers or anything like that? No, it's just where the market needs to be. You need to sell your house for what the market value is. Kind of makes sense, right? And so if anyone disagrees or wants to add anything, definitely reach out to us here at Vision2Mission, and we'd be more than happy to have that conversation. But as we're in the fall, when I walk outside every day, my lawn is covered with leaves, beautiful colored leaves, which tells me we're coming into the fall. And normally every single year, there is a shift, because real estate generally is a seasonal, it's a seasonal profession, unless you're down in Florida, right, or you're somewhere else. But up here in the DMV, it's very seasonal, which is a great thing. Why is that a great thing? Because you don't always want it to be go, 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 because there's an eventual burnout that takes place with that. But there's a time when we have to kind of take a step back, reassess, look forward to the next year, and so on and so forth. As far as buyer demand is concerned, again, that's a direct result of the higher interest rates, the higher 30-year fixed on conventional loans, FHA loans, VA loans. So the higher the interest rate, that does have a direct effect on what's called buying power, right? So for example, these aren't necessarily real numbers, but I'm just kind of giving you an example. At this point last year, okay, where let's say the average 30-year fixed on a conventional Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan might have been around 2.875, 2.99. That would have a person's monthly payment, let's say, for example, be around $2,500 per month on a $450,000 house, taking some other factors into consideration, okay? Now, when you're looking at the average interest rate being around 7%, give or take, on the same type of loan, that if the person wants to stay at a $2,500 per month budget, then that's going to take them from that $400, $450 range about $100,000 lower, easily, maybe about $125,000 lower or more to stay within that budget range. Those are just how the numbers work. Okay. So people have to make decisions, and a lot of buyers have decided to back out or to extend their rental leases or do whatever because they want to wait. They don't necessarily want to buy while the interest rates are so high, and or they want to kind of hedge their bets and hope within the next 12 to 18 months that interest rates will be coming down, and then their buying power will go back up. And I actually believe that probably within the next 12 to 18 months, hopefully sooner, we will see a little bit more of an ebb, with these interest rates, and they will begin to come back down. And what that also does is for all the people that have purchased homes between February and now of this year, incrementally, people will be able to refinance. Now, if you purchased a home in February or March of this year, well, interest rates might have been in the high 4s or the 5s, or April, May, or June, right around that time frame. But now rates are in the high 6s and 7s, so it really doesn't apply to everyone, right? Not everyone is going to have a good, viable reason to refinance. You have to really take a look at it and see what's called a net tangible benefit. Okay, so we're not giving a mortgage class today, but I highly encourage you to look into Google what's called a net tangible benefit, because you just can't refinance for any reason. That was way back in the day. You actually have to have a reason that is a benefit for you today to refinance. So kind of staying within that realm. When people do refinance, or, going into the future, when people do purchase homes, a lot of the mortgage qualifying criteria is going to change. Okay, so I have an article up on the screen right now, and this is from the Scotsman's Guide, and it says the FHA, okay, the Federal Housing Finance Administration, okay, abolishes several fees, replaces the classic FICO with a new credit score. So I'm just going to kind of scroll down. I'm not going to read all of this, but we'll definitely put the link in the show notes for you. So here's the gist. Okay. In the past, we've had a classic FICO model. Okay. The term FICO stands for Fair Isaac's Company, basically, which is part of the model of how you look at credit scores today. Remember, there are 3 major credit bureaus out there. You have Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. And so for each of them, they will assign you a score, right? If your credit's terrible and it's messed up and you've had a lot of things late and a lot of things going on, you're going to be anywhere in that 400 to 500 range. You just will be. If your credit is average, kind of mediocre, halfway decent, here and there, you're going to be in the 600s. If your credit is excellent, then you're going to be on the 700s on up, going toward the 800s. Now, that's not necessarily a bad model, but what they're doing is they are updating it with what's called the FICO 10T model, which is going to take more things into consideration so that more people can properly qualify for a home. So again, I encourage you to do your own research on this. Why is this important? This is important because, number one, regardless of what's taking place in the different logistical and the different changes that are taking place, you still want to pay your bills on time. You still do not want to run very high balances on your credit cards. You still don't want to have anything in collection. You still want to avoid bankruptcy at all costs if you can. You still don't want to have a short sale. You still do not want to have a foreclosure, and you still definitely do not want any judgments or public records on your credit. All right. Now, along with that, because those are more defensive type things, offensively, you still want to be able to build your credit. What do I mean by that? Well, you want to have a nice balance with regards to having what's called installment loans as well as revolving debt. When you have a nice balance of those things, it helps you to build a higher score. Now, why is having a higher score important? Because remember, it's kind of the past performance is a predictor of future performance. And so the credit score is basically an assignment. It's a representation of how well have you managed your credit, how well have you managed your debt, okay, over a certain period of time. So when a bank looks at your credit report, they say, okay, this person has done a fantastic job. They've done a fair job, so on and so forth. And it's more of a predictor along with other items like your income, like money you have in the bank, right? Like your debt to income ratio, all of those things go into the term of what's called credit worthiness, making sure that you are in a very good position and that you're going to repay whatever loan you take out. That's extremely important. Going into next year, it's extremely important, really, these last two months and a week that we have left, that you properly plan and not be afraid of interest rates. So let me repeat that. Halloween is coming up. The big bad wolf is coming out, right? Do not be afraid of interest rates. Why? Because in my opinion, as a mortgage professional, it's not so much about the interest rate, okay? It is really about what is your monthly payment budget for you and your family, Okay. And how much flexibility do you have there? What type of proper planning have you done specifically with regards to that? Interest rates will go up and they will come down and they will stay stagnant. And it really depends upon the economy. Okay. Now you can take a chance and you can try to wait. Absolutely. But if there's a house out there that's meant for you, it's meant for you. And you can always refinance when rates do come down, and then you have the proper opportunity to do so. So that's my professional opinion with regards to this. But I highly encourage you to read this article because it talks about the GSEs. Okay, so the GSEs that are out there are what's called Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, essentially service or own the vast majority of the loans that are sold on the market. So what they have to say is very, very important with regards to conventional loans. FHA loans, the rates tend to be a little bit lower, and that's really administered by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and FHA, which is the Federal Housing Administration. And of course, you have VA loans. Now, one thing that we did not talk about today, which we'll talk about in subsequent videos, is something called non-QM loans. QM stands for qualified mortgage. And again, we won't get into too many details, but look at it like this. It's more like alternative financing. Okay. It's financing for people who maybe are self-employed and you're like, yeah, IRS, I made this much money, but the bank is like, well, if you made this much money, you don't qualify, but really your top line is higher. Or you may not have the highest credit score, but you have a lot of money to put down. You just have a non-vanilla type of, loan scenario. You have more of a creative financing type of loan scenario. That there are lots of loans out there that exist for those individuals, people who are looking to buy investment properties and things of that nature. But understand, those interest rates are going to be very different than a normal qualified mortgage, a normal Fannie, Freddie, FHA, VA loan. Why? Because they're higher risk. Okay. And that risk is passed on to you as the consumer. So you might be looking somewhere in the 8s or the mid to high 9s or definitely the 10s when you're looking at those types of loans. But again, it depends upon your perspective. What's your objective with regards to purchasing a home? And then when you have all of that in play, then you may or may not be intimidated. You may or may not decide to make that move, but that's fine because it's all about your research and what you're looking to do. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have Mr. Guy Allen from eXp Realty. He's going to come and join me, and we're going to talk about a few other very pertinent items taking place right now in the mortgage and real estate industries. All right, Guy, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, sir. Thank you.
All right. So people, if you don't know who this man is a living legend here in the DMV, Mr. Guy Allen of eXp Realty. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Well, I'm honored. Hopefully I can live up to those expectations.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. So we're going to just dig right in, right? So the market's been crazy this year. It's been very volatile. There's been people that have come into the housing market. There's been a lot of people that have come out. So what are your thoughts with regards to some of the volatility that's been taking place with regards to interest rates? And do you think buyers are even still motivated to buy?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot in that question, but
Yep.
the real estate market as a whole has always been cyclical.
Yep.
Okay. Usually when the winter months come, the buyers taper off, and as they go up, it's when it gets warmer, people get out and they peep out and they start looking around
Right.
more. So we've got a couple of things that are happening here. One is the interest rates are going up,
Right.
and the buyer pool, as a result, always goes down in the winter. So guess what? You got interest rates that are going up, so the buyer pool decreases, so
Right.
it decreases even further.
Right.
So going into the spring market, hopefully that that market is going to improve with the buyers peeping out and looking around more. But rates are still going to be probably going up and a little bit more next year if the Feds raise the rates again.
Right. Right.
So, there's a couple of, this is right now what we're experiencing is more of a buyer's market because there's not a lot of inventory on the market right now, because interest rates are higher and
Right.
buyers can't qualify for as much. So when those rates go up 1%, your buyer pool gets shrunk and goes down and goes down and goes down. So now we're up a point, maybe 2 points since 2 or 3 points since it was the 2s and 3s. So you can imagine what that's done to the inventory, the market, and the pool.
Absolutely. So can you define for the audience what a buyer's market is versus a seller's market?
Okay, so a seller's it's supply and demand.
Okay. Yep.
So when there's a lot of buyers and a little bit of inventory, it's a seller's market, to put it simply. So you have more people than you have houses available. So when that happens, of course, the sellers can ask for more for their property. So we saw that last year and the year before, where there were 15, 20, 30 offers on houses. Properties were going up $50,000 to $100,000 over market, because some people had to move because of their jobs or whatever. Or they figured, well, the rates are so low, I need to capitalize now and recoup that money later. Well, when it's a buyer's market, there's more inventory than there are buyers. So it's just the opposite. So now you've got buyers that can negotiate a little bit more on their on the pricing, concessions, et cetera, because properties are sitting on the market instead of 2 to 3 days, they're sitting on the market, 45 to 30 to 45 days average on the market now.
Absolutely.
So the tables have kind of turned a little bit.
Absolutely. And so over the past, let's just call it a couple decades, because I know a lot of people, they like to compare what we're facing today to like 2008 or so, but there's more people who have a lot of experience who say, well, wait a minute, it's all about having some perspective, because when you look at like the 80s and then the early 90s, the rates were much higher. So would you say that in terms of just the overall positioning of the market, is it kind of the same? Like in terms of like buyers are going to buy, sellers are going to sell, even where rates were even higher than they are today?
So I was in the market, in the business in 77. I was actually in the mortgage side.
77.
1977, during the Carter years, when it went up to, in 1980, I think interest rates
come closer to you,
were
Mike.
somewhere around, interest rates were somewhere around 18, 19%.
Whoa.
Well, people were still having to buy.
That's check cash in place
kind
of interest rates.
18, 19%. But people just figured, look, I need to get a place. It's only going to be a couple of years before it goes back down there. I'll just refinance out.
Right.
And the average family stays in a house, 5 to 7 years. Okay. So they figure, well, if it's 18%, they were figuring back then, if it's 18%, I'm never going to pay for it anyway on a 30-year mortgage. Somebody else is going to pay for that. I'll get the deductions, and I get the things that I'm going to need. And the refi market was the same way. They figure, well, I need the money now to put my kids through school or pay off some, consolidate some debt and take care of the need that I have right now.
Right.
Well, moving down the line here, you're looking, 10, 15, 20 years later, we got a lot of the same thing. It's the same basic principle. It's just that the interest rates are higher and lower. But when we look at where we were from today, looking back, right, we were paying 8, 9% back then. So people still had to have a place to live. Yep. They still had to put their kids through school. Right. They still had to consolidate debt, and they still had to relocate. So the common denominator is that the house is still sitting there. We changed, but the house, still sits there. So people still need to make those moves. Right. So what can you do to kind of offset that? What a lot of people do is, well, they do a chart. They say, well, if I'm going to pay $25,000 more for a house, but I'm paying 2% interest, how long is it going to take for me to recoup
the difference?
That difference.
Absolutely.
And basically what people have done is said, well, they betting on the future that, hey, the rates are going to, property values are going to go up after they buy it, they recoup it, somebody else is going to pay for it. And that's always been kind of the case when it comes to short-term or long-term investors. Right. They should have the concept in their minds that I don't know who's going to pay for it, but it's not going to be me, and using leverage to get what they need to get where they want to go.
No, I think that's a fantastic point because, I think there's two sides to the coin, and I think you presented the one side excellently in terms of if I'm a buyer and I've paid an extra, let's just call it $50,000 for a house in Loudoun County, right, which is about what it was, in late 2020, 2021. And if myself and my family, we plan on staying there for a long time, right, 5, 6, 7, 10 years, 15 years, I might be looking at today like I might not have gotten a bad deal. like,
Right.
paying that much more versus if I were to buy that house today
Right.
at market rate, but look at where my interest rate would be, literally 2.5 times
Right.
more. So, I think it really just does depend upon what's the person's situation, what's the family's outlook.
Exactly. And, if I'm sitting in a house that's, let's just say, $600,000, and I'm looking to upsize my house because I'm in a neighborhood, but I want to move up.
Right.
Well, the problem for me is that, I've got a good interest rate, I got a good price right now. Where am I going to go? That's affordable for a higher rate. So that's why we have that shrinkage in inventory. People are just saying, well, I'm going to sit tight. Then you look
That's
at
a good point.
look at the rental market right now. The rental market has crept up to where it's almost as much as a mortgage.
Yes. Yep.
So some people are saying, well, rather than me pay $2,800 a month for rent, maybe I can spend a couple of $100 more and get a townhouse. May not be the perfect house, but I can make those moves, make those decisions, based on what my immediate needs are and the size of my family and the future of where we're going to need to be.
No, and that makes perfect sense, and that's kind of in the mortgage market. That's what we've done with a lot of clients. Like, for example, if someone was paying, let's just use $2,000 a month in rent,
Right.
then we'd be able to say, okay, well, you could buy a really nice or a decent townhouse for 300, whatever the number is, and pay right around, give or take a couple $100 because people need to be flexible, but you could own. And you have all the benefits of home ownership versus renting, and I think that's a strong case.
Yes.
Now, again, I think that case changes today because what they could buy per dollar, because the interest rates are again 2.5, 3 times higher, is different.
Right.
But the concept doesn't change. You can still own. It's just that, do people want to own? Are they willing to settle for a little bit less?
Right, and there's some strategies that a buyer can use today. They can look at trying to get more concessions, in the sense of doing a buy down. A lot of people are doing buy downs right now, in the hope of getting that payment.
Can you explain the buy down to everyone?
Buy down is an additional cost that a purchaser would have to make to get their interest rate lowered. So there's different types of buy downs, and someone like you can tell them what those are.
Right.
But for the most part, you spend a little more money out of pocket to get the rate that you need for the comfort level or to meet the debt to income ratios that are required by a lender.
Yep. No, absolutely. And that's a big thing in mortgage lending these days. And so I think that one of the strategies that a lot of buyers can do is, if you're in a buyer's market, as you mentioned earlier, you have more negotiating space. So you might be able to get some what's called seller concessions or credit from the seller towards your closing cost.
Right.
So if you're able to do that, then you're able to directly apply that to lower your interest rate because the seller's going to pay for it. And as a result, you have a lower monthly payment.
Exactly.
So that's one way of how a buy down works. So absolutely, I totally agree. So you lead a sizable team here, with eXp Realty here in in the Virginia, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. What are you doing, for your own, personal production, your own business, and how are you helping prepare your team, kind of during this turbulent time with regards to interest rates and as we're looking into next year?
Well, actually, that's one of the strategies that we're using.
Okay.
The buy downs and doing a comparison.
Okay.
The comparison with the rent versus owning. So, we're talking to our agents in a sense that, look, it's not a lot of inventory, out there, but you got a lot of opportunities to get something now that you can hold on to for the next 3 to 5 years.
Right.
Do a buy down of some sort or get some concessions. There's down payment assistance programs because cash is king. You want to keep us hold on to your cash because we don't know what might happen in the future.
Right.
COVID has taught us some serious lessons over the last few years to squirrel away those acorns so that you can have some money stored up in case of an emergency. So we're educating our buyers a lot more in the sense that you can rent a place and maybe it's a little cheaper, or it may be you don't have to do the maintenance and such, and that's what a lot of buyers are concerned with. But I think in the long term, owning is going to give them a bigger benefit. So we have to show them how the owning outweighs, renting.
Right, absolutely. And there's different people out there, big name people who say, well, no, you should just rent. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that. Not just because I'm a mortgage broker, but again, there's a lot of tax benefits for that. I think there's a lot of emotional and family benefits, that come out of it. Just the overall, and there's stability benefits. You don't have someone that's going to give you an email or a piece of paper and give you your 60 days before you need to vacate, unless you don't pay your mortgage,
Right.
then that's going to happen. Right. But you have something that belongs to you. And I think that's one of the bedrocks and the foundation of our democracy and of capitalism, of this country, is to definitely be able to own.
Yeah. If I'm a landlord, then from my perspective, it's like, yeah, you should probably rent, and you should rent from me because it's going to put my kids through college.
Absolutely.
One of the most, and I don't want to necessarily say investments, but long-term returns that we have received has been, for the average Joe, has been their house, their property.
Right.
Properties have gone down through the ages of families, generational wealth. It's giving you immediate, tax benefits and short-term equity. You can get equity. There's home equity loans that you can get in case of emergencies. Right. You don't want to necessarily use your house as a piggy bank, but you can also. It's easier to have a home equity line of some sort in case of emergencies.
Absolutely.
Or some sort if you don't have enough savings. So where else can you get that kind of access?
No, I agree 100%.
Unless it's your 401k. But for a lot of the average blue collar workers, that's not an option. They have to have something else because their savings is limited because of the cost of living. Inflation is just going up. So the one thing that's been stable, over the last 40 years, is you look at the values of properties, how they've continually gone up. You won't see a whole lot of properties that are on the market 40 years ago that are the same value.
Right.
20 years, they're not the same value. They've gone up.
Absolutely.
So when you look at that growth, that's something that's definitely been sure, and it's been consistent, and for the most part, it's been stable.
No, I agree 120%, and it's that when you look at Washington D.C., for example, I think there's been almost an epidemic of sorts where you have a lot of minorities for generations who've owned homes in Washington D.C. There's been a lot of gentrification that's taken place. There's a lot of development that's taken place, and I think what has happened as a result, a lot of that passing down of the home ownership has not taken place. Right. Now, again, different people have different financial circumstances, so they're going to make decisions that are best for them.
Right.
But for someone who bought a house in Southeast, can you imagine if someone bought a house in Southeast and they owned it with, now you have the National Stadium down there, you have Audi Field, you have the Wharf, you have all kinds of government buildings, a house that you could have literally bought for like $40,000, $50,000. Right. It's worth about $1 million.
Oh yeah.
Like it's exponent on top of exponent in terms of how it's gone up with value. And if that would have been passed down, then you have that generational wealth. But the question, it's a very cliched word, generational wealth. But to me, it's about what do you do with that wealth?
Right.
Because what is wealth? Wealth is ownership, and you talked about equity. Right. And if you don't know what equity is a very, very simple concept. It's the difference between what something is worth and what you owe. Right. That's it. That Oreo stuff in between, right, is your equity, is your ownership, is your wealth. Period. It's super simple. Right. And I think what people would do with that wealth, I think if they transferred and handed down the information and the knowledge on how to handle it, it would help people so much more. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's great. I mean, if you have a house that's paid off that you owe zero, and that's just family or generational wealth, something that the family can use to put your grandkids or great grandkids through school. Absolutely. Or take care of situations that may come up. Not having that, has been I guess you could say, has been a downfall of a lot of underserved communities because they don't have the education, or they don't understand what that really is, or what that really, really means. back before there were FHA loans, you had to put down, 25, 30%, and up to 50% down to buy a house. So what families do you know that were having, those, we're talking a bunch of farmers,
Right.
People that work in janitorial work that had that kind of money in their underserved communities. So with FHA coming out and having these lower down payment types loans with insurance that would guarantee that the bank would get their money back, 3.5%. Now that's a big difference. Everybody should own a house, with a difference of 50% down versus 3.5%. So just understanding how that leverage, you're controlling that piece of property for 3.5% down, but you're getting the benefits, all the bundle of rights that come with home ownership. You get the tax benefits, you get the equity, you get to use, you can lay out in your grass, you can cut your own grass.
That's right. That's what I do.
It's just a beautiful thing, just be able to cut your own grass.
Our AV guy Anton doesn't do that, but I do it. There's a satisfaction.
Cutting your own grass.
I'm satisfied with Salome.
Anton's off screen, but he's right here.
You can plant. You can just have some solace in knowing that this is yours. This is your property. Your kids can stay right on your property, and you own it, and nobody can take that away from you.
Absolutely. My wife and I have discussed that several times with regards to our kids. Like, okay, I am 99.9% sure. Like, I just would not sell my house.
Right.
Because I would want my children to have it. Now, again, there's that 0.1% chance I would sell it for whatever reason, but
right price.
Yeah, exactly. Like right price. Like what? Okay, get another one for you girls.
Everything's for sale for the right price.
Right, but I just in my heart of hearts would want to, because it's in a great neighborhood with great neighbors, great schools, great amenities. Like there's a lot of other things besides the house that bring value to it.
Exactly.
For sure. And so I would want to be able to pass it down to them, potentially for their families, or if we needed to use it, for equity or whatever the reasons that come up. And again, I think, this is not a one size fits all for everybody. But, it's funny. I was thinking about, this is back in 2006. My wife and I bought a house in New Jersey when my first daughter was just born. And my whole plan was, because they were just going up. I was like, okay, in 6 months to a year, I'm going to either take a HELOC, a home equity line of credit out. I'm going to refinance. I'm going to take this amount of money. I'm going to pay off this debt. I'm going to invest this. And I had this plan in mind.
Right.
I mean, me personally. And I think it was the next year, like coming into like August 2007 into the fall. And that went down the drain. Like all my hopes and dreams. I was like, OMG. And it just kept going down from there. And I worked in the field. But I mean, kind of think about everyone else who may not have been in the same type of financial situation, and they were banking on that.
Right.
And as a result, so many people walked away, or they had to walk away.
Right.
Now, again, I think there's a lot of, you can't necessarily directly compare then to today. It's
right.
very, very, very different.
Right.
But I think the mentality is still the same. And I think it requires us to have an overall financial responsibility, in planning. And I think along with that, for you, your team, what are your thoughts going into 2023? Meaning, do you see at some point the interest rate environment getting a little bit more stable? Do you see it coming back down? Do you see it shifting in the spring, going back to a seller's market? What are some of your thoughts on that?
2023 is going to be an interesting year.
Okay.
In this sense, one, we've got interest rates that are going to be high, they're going to be up, and they're going to get higher. They're not going to come down in the spring.
Got it.
That's just the trend, the cyclical trend.
Right.
Also, values generally go up. The prices go up. So we're going to see a turn in the market back, possibly to where we were in the early 2022, late 2021. We're going to see those kind of increases.
Okay.
So my point is that you should start making your decisions now.
Okay.
As to why we're on the down slope. If you look at the market values, buyers are having a lot of negotiating power right now.
Right.
And going into December, try to get it done before the end of the year because you get the tax benefits this
Absolutely.
year. But if not, going into January, February, it's going to be snow on the ground. Those signs have been sitting out there swinging back and forth, for a while. So you got a little leverage. As a matter of fact, we used to have an old joke that when I was doing a lot of investing, I would wait till the worst day of the year and put on my overcoat, my boots, and go out when the snow was blizzard was going this
Right.
way and the sign was half leaning over. And I show up knocking on the door. Say, hey, you guys still interested in selling?
Hey, why not, right?
That's the perfect time for
That's
an
right.
investor.
Yes.
When nobody else is showing up and it's cold. So we're going into a market. If you're paying attention, you could do very well with the buying. And if you're investing, for investors also, I think that investors have a great potential to get something that they probably wouldn't have never been able to get earlier part of this year.
Absolutely, right.
So going into 2023, as we start getting towards the summer months, et cetera, it's going to get a little tight. Get a little tight. So you want to get in early, and a lot of the folks that waited, when they were at 2%, they were saying, "Oh, I wish I had." I wish I had went on ahead and made that decision.
Right.
Well, you don't want to be that person that's saying, "Oh man, I should have done it back then." No, you don't want to do that. You want to get in on that market on the front side early, so that you're not trying to make up for lost ground. You lose a lot of ground when the market changes.
No, that makes perfect sense, and I really appreciate that. So, listen, everybody. Hopefully, you've gotten a lot out of this conversation. With myself and here with Mr. Guy Allen of EXP Realty. His contact information will be in the show notes. So please check out our show notes to reach out to Mr. Guy Allen if you have any real estate related questions whatsoever, especially here in the DMV or wherever. He is a wealth of knowledge and experience to be able to give to you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you for having me, Brandon. It's always a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to working with you on some more transactions.
Absolutely, no doubt. So thank you so much for checking us out on this episode of the Vision2Mission podcast. Keep your family safe, keep yourself safe, make smart decisions, love and take care.